BPEP, that's the Berkeley Postdoc Entrepreneurship Program. I just wanted to give a brief overview about what we do before we dive into first our local pitch event, and then we'll go ahead and get right to the speakers. So first, let's give a thanks to those who make BPEP happen. So that's the Vice Chancellor for Research, Kat, the Director of VISPA, that's Yvette Lane-Newton, and Skydeck and Baker Fellows, who help us co-sponsor the event, especially the space here, this beautiful space. So the mission of BPEP is to foster entrepreneurship in UC Berkeley in the postdoc and graduate community. I think, raise your hand if you're a postdoc here. How many of you guys are postdocs here? So some postdocs, how many of you are grad students? Any grad students? Some, well, everyone, we all spend a lot of time in the lab every day, and a lot of us come up with great ideas, and we want to maybe turn that into a business. And we think entrepreneurship is an integral part of the campus ethos, and we aim to build a community of entrepreneurship among our postdocs here. So what we do is we put on a workshop every month where we kind of give you this essential entrepreneurship toolkit. We actually will give you access to business leaders for mentorship. We'll help you actually assist in building your own startup company, and we'll provide a platform, particularly the hard science. So this is the BPEP team. So this is the board. We will be actually refreshing our board members. Some have actually left throughout the year, so we will be hosting new applications. But this is the board as of 2018, 2019. You can see me here. You can see, one of our speakers will be the founder today, and we have, I especially want to thank Dr. Rice. Is it Rice? Race. I never say that right. And Dr. Sylvia Grammel for coming out here. For both being. All right, we have a website which we're also in the process of renovating. So if you look at it and it's not great, it'll get better. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about our job portal, which we've been working on. Our next month we'll actually be doing a postdoc job fair. So if you actually show up next month, it'll be a good chance to get your resume out there for some companies who'll be looking to hire postdocs. So our spring series is underway. This is the second one. So today we'll be looking at entrepreneurial faculty along with students who have launched startups. And then we'll actually have our job fair next time. And then we'll bring in some investors from May who are actually willing to invest in hard technologies and talk about some of the startups they funded. So let's actually, before we dive into our topic for today, and before I introduce the speakers, let's go ahead and do our pitch event. So for those of you who are doing startups and want to just give a brief 2-minute pitch about what you do, who is that? I know you came up to me. Why don't we get you guys up first?
I'm Alejandro from Mexico. My startup is in the lab-grown diamond industry. We do e-commerce and jewelry reselling by importing the lab-grown diamonds with partnerships with lab-grown diamond suppliers. For those of you who don't know, the lab-grown diamonds are exactly the same as the diamonds. They recreated the process in the mine, in a laboratory, and they have basically 3 differences. Number 1, the time of the production of the diamond, which is 1 month. Number 2, the origin. Lab-grown diamonds are eco-friendly, no blood diamonds, all the ethical issues. And number 3, 30% to 40% better price. The third difference, so that's the third difference. That's my startup in 1.5 years ago. I had an idea these past weeks in the financial services. It's like a Venmo, similar to Venmo, with a totally different business model, creating with rewards of points in Latin America. If some of you are interested in that area, I'm really happy to talk to you. And well, that's basically what I do. Thank you.
Perfect. So when can I buy a lab-grown diamond?
Where can you buy it? Online.
When can I buy it now?
Yeah, bornmine.com.
All right. Well, I'll make sure. I might have an engagement coming in.
Great.
If I do, I'll keep that in mind. Anyone else? Yep. Go for it.
Hello everyone. My name is Arthur. I am from Brazil, from Latin America as well, and I'm a visiting scholar here in Berkeley in the entrepreneurship program. My startup, it's called Grabow Sports. We work with sports video. We use computer vision to analyze videos from matches and practice to try to get insights and data for team development. We are working with soccer teams, 2 teams there in Brazil, Santos and Maringá, and with Call Soccer here at UC Berkeley. Our goal is to get pragmatic data from videos that it's really related to the situation that the team faces now. So if it could be a precision, it could be the end of a championship. So it's not tons of data, it's really pragmatic data that the team needs to achieve their goals.
Very cool. Sounds awesome. All right, anyone else? Okay, I think that's it for today. But thank you so much for getting out there. It's always great to hear new startups. Let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. So we have two great speakers today. One of them is Dr. Ming Wu, who is the Nortel Distinguished Professor of Electrical and Engineering Computer Science here at Berkeley, and is also the founder of Berkeley Lights. We also have Dr. Naresh Sunkara, who is a former postdoc at Berkeley. He's actually the founder of BPEP, so the reason that we're all here today, and is the founder of a company called Nosocom Solutions. So let's actually have you both, who wants to go first? All right, we'll have Dr. Wu come up first and give a talk about some of the about his experience going from academia to entrepreneurship. Okay. Let's see if this works.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hi, it's great to meet you all. I'm wondering, for those of you who are neither postdocs nor graduate students, can you say where are your affiliation or where you're from? Or background?
Yeah, so I used to be a postdoc at Berkeley.
Okay. To put on the break, to be less aggressive.
Oh, okay.
And
It's
there are other
it's the program.
breakpoints.
Okay.
Great. Anybody?
Scholars.
Scholars? Okay, all right, great. So, so this is my first time to this event. I don't know the format.
There's always an undergrad that comes with a pizza. You know, but
Okay. And beer, so they left immediately before they got roped in.
Smart people.
Right.
We're not checking their age, right?
That's right. So anyway, Naresh and Nitin asked me to share my experience about our journey, go from our research, which is optoelectronic tweezers, to spinning out the technology. Now it's in a company called Berkeley Lights. So first, I'll have a disclaimer. I probably am not a good entrepreneur because I'm not interested in just starting a company. I'm more on the technology push side. I'm interested in spinning out technology we developed. So if you talk to savvy business people, these are exactly the wrong approach. So take my advice as a grain of salt. I'm giving you probably a better advice for becoming a professor, which I heard you have aspiration to do, than becoming an entrepreneur. But anyway, there is a serendipitous opportunity that we are fortunate, able to spinning out our technology. So let me start with some introduction. These are obviously very recent examples. This is way after we have started our company. So some of you may remember that in summer 2015, former President Jimmy Carter announced that he has advanced melanoma, and which has already spread to liver and brain, and literally the whole country is prepared to say goodbye to him. And in December, just mere 3 months after his announcement, he has recovered, and they couldn't find traces of his cancer anymore. So this is sort of one of these early pretty amazing recovery stories of this immunotherapy. So I didn't know all this. I'm an engineering professor, so I'm learning all this after we had a company that's kind of now applying the technology to the ecosystem of this immunotherapy. So there's a thing called checkpoint immunotherapy. So generally, there are probably bio researchers here who knows way more about these biology. So the T cells, our natural immune systems, they are capable of killing cancer cells. But cancer cells have also learned how to evade them. when there are antibody antigens, they will have a perfect match. That's how the T cell will find, say, cancer cells. But cancer cells will secrete some chemicals. There are some molecules called, in this example, CTLA4, which will block one of the important receptors. And these receptors are so-called the checkpoint receptors, meaning they tell the T cell to put on a brake, to be less aggressive. And there are other breakpoints, such as the PD-1. So Jimmy Carter received the treatment for this PD-1. PD-1, as the name suggests, programs cell death. So if the cancer cell attached to PD-1, then the T cell lose its effectiveness and basically self-destroy. So the mitigation is basically develop antibodies, highly precise antibody, so-called monoclonal antibody, meaning they are produced by only one type of cells. And this antibody can be programmed to bind selectively to either CTLA4 receptors on T cell or PD-1. So this is anti-PD-1 antibody. So this type of therapy, called monoclonal antibody therapy, is the newer trend called biologic drugs. Most of the top 10 drugs are now called so-called these biologic drugs. And this is one of the highest profile one because of this amazing effect that they have demonstrated curing cancers. And very recent, just late last year, these two gentlemen were awarded Nobel Prize in medicine. One of them, Jim Ellison, is affiliated with Berkeley, and his most important discovery, this CTLA4 checkpoint, was discovered while he was here at Berkeley. He left Berkeley to pursue larger scale test of this therapy. Eventually went to Sloan Kettering and finally ended up in MD Anderson Cancer Center. He shared the prize with a Japanese researcher who discovered the PD-1 mechanisms. So obviously, we didn't know all these while we spin out our technology, but gradually we learned these emerging business for pharmaceutical companies is to produce monoclonal antibodies, antibodies that are highly specific, targeting a very specific ligands on a cell. So how are they produced? This is actually a very old technology, invented in 1975, got Nobel Prize in 1984. This is a so-called hybridoma technology, very ancient technology. So it all started with immunize a mouse. So you inject the antigens, so the virus or the specific mechanism that causes a particular illness into a mouse. And after a month or so, you harvest the mouse spleen, which is full of T cells, full of white blood cells. White blood cells by themselves, they don't multiply well. So these gentlemen, Kohler, invented a technology fusing these white blood cells with, ironically, a cancer cell. A cancer cell is very robust and they never die. So he hybridized these two, creating an artificial cell called hybridoma. And these very rudimentary technology are still being used. It's still one of the mainstreams for producing monoclonal antibodies. And certainly at the time we started our company in 2011, 2012, we go around, talk to pharmaceutical companies. This is their gold mines, we propose how we can help them improve the process. They say, don't ever touch it. It works. Don't break it if it works. But it is a very tedious, cumbersome process. First, you fuse these two cells together. the efficiency is very bad, usually much, much lower than 1%. Meaning you throw away 99% of the good stuff. So every white blood cell secrete different type of antibodies. The whole game is to find out which one of them is the gold mine, which one of them produce the exact right antibodies that you need. So in the first step, you throw away 99% of them. Not a good value proposition. And then you need to isolate them. There's still a very large number of them. You start with something like 1 billion white blood cells. Even after you lose 99%, you still have 10 to the 7th. And you gradually kind of screening, and finally you end up with probably 100,000. You start to play them out. How do you play them out? Well, it's a process called limited dilution. You have sufficiently diluted solutions so that you put them, fix the amount of solution in a tiny well. On the average, they have 1 cell or less. So this way you can isolate this large number of cells. And a campaign to do this takes 10 to 20 weeks. It's a major campaign that needs to be scheduled, starting with injecting with the mouse. And eventually you end up with promising cells, okay? You isolate them, shown in the bottom 3 here, and you grow each population to roughly about 1,000 cells. Why grow them up? Otherwise, the antibody they secreted is too dilute. You cannot find them. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. So you multiply them enough so there are enough needles, you can see them. This is a very time-consuming process, very expensive process. So this is a starting point, the spleen, taking advantage of the immune system produced by animal, in this case mouse. And antibody, this is where the gold mine is. This is the gold. This is the bitcoins of the bio world. If we can find a way to go from spleen directly to antibody, bypassing all these middle steps, and you do that in days rather than months, that's a huge saving. And that will allow pharmaceutical companies to get to the target a lot more faster. Okay. This is what we understood eventually around year 2012, year 2013, and we started the company in 2011. We knew nothing about this. What we have built, so I guess Nitin and Naresh asked me to share with you what we do at the university. This is the research that we do at the university. I have a few bright students who we are trying to find an alternative way we can trap microparticles more efficiently than the optical tweezer, which also won Nobel Prize last year. It's a very well-known technique. You take a laser beam. This is like a Star Trek tractor beam. You shine a light, you grab the object. So we're fascinated by that, and we find an alternative way that does not use light energy itself. We shine light onto very simple light-sensitive devices, almost like solar cells. Materials are exactly like solar cells. And these solar cells become conductive because the light generates lots of photocarriers, just like in solar cells. So we generate this light pattern, and through another electrical bias, this light pattern controls the electric field distribution inside the liquid. So in other words, we created some of my friends call invisible dog fences. The fences are invisible, but it is exactly where we project the light to be. So we just take a light projector, TI's a digital light projector, and project them through a microscope, creating, in this case, for example, a conveyor belt. This is a virtual conveyor belt. It's basically just a picture. You can do the animation yourself. Just create a pattern, create a movie, it's moving. But this movie is actually doing physical work, carrying the particles along with them. So it is a real conveyor belt, light programmable, light cages. So we kind of dreamed we can scale this up. we can control maybe huge number of them, 10 to the fifth, 100,000 cells at the same time. Okay, what have we demonstrated in the lab? Well, maybe tens of cells, hundreds of cells. This is actually, the next slide is actually the most complex experiment we have done. We take 15 light cages, and I don't know if the movie is playing. Maybe the movie doesn't seem to be playing. Anyway, what we have done is we trapped individual cells. Now this is cells, not particles, and watch them grow over a week. This is, I believe, the first time we are able to do these confined cell growth. If we don't confine them in these dog fences, what happened is they flow away, just like this upper right-hand corner picture. They are liquid flow constantly, so it's very difficult to track where the cell goes. We're using these dog fences now for the first time. We are able to observe these cells, watch them divide. And you see, even with a small population of 15, they don't always divide at the same rate. There are heterogeneity already in these small populations. And we see some actually doubles at a regular speed, and some, the cell just keep growing. You can see they become larger and larger, but they don't divide. And in traditional biology, what do we measure? Traditional biology, we measure in bulk. That means there's a large number of cells, and we do cell counting. So over 3 days, we count cells again, and then we arrive at this magical number called doubling period. Sometimes it's like 25 hours, 28 hours. If you do this detailed cell by cell observation, you'll find actually there's a normal growing population. They double every 24 hours. And then there's a population that never doubles. If you do an average, well, you kind of get a number that doesn't correspond to anything. So this is first time it shows the power if we get to the point of tracking individual cells, what we can do. This is our idea of automation back before we spin off the companies. These picture also show the two original graduate students, Eric Chow, who is now a professor at UCLA, Aaron Ota, who is now a professor at University of Hawaii. They do a virtual reality thing. So we are electrical engineers. They take a camera shooting at the screen where we have the microscopic pictures. Then they put down these black cages, take another camera, pick up where the black cages are, and instruct the projector on the microscope to project exactly at the same location. Well, nothing fancy. This is kind of like augmented reality that we all do now. But back in those days, this is one of the few demonstrations. Anyway, this is a fun demonstration. Doesn't really have any real application, but it did caught the eye of my partner, who has much farther vision than I can see. We got together and spinning out this technology, called Berkeley Lights. By now, so it has about 120 people now, and it's amazing when you have this number of people, lots of experienced engineers and scientists, how well you can do things. For those of you who are still postdocs and students, in your experiment, it's like you need all stars lining up in order for your experiment to work. It worked once in a blue moon. Do I want to start a company using this technology? I make it work once. I got my Ph.D., I'm done. If I have to be responsible for the investors who come and say, does it really work? So, our initial devices are in the same stage. It's not robust. It doesn't work every time. It does work when everything is pristine. But with this large group of people, every tiny root causes are cleaned up, and they are very robust. They are very reproducible. So let me just show you how the technology becomes, fast forward 5 years now. So First of all, we recognize that we cannot just rely on the invisible dog fences. We need real fences to keep the cell there, so we can leave them alone for days. So these are real cages, real walls. And microfluidics is not new. A lot of microfluidics company, maybe even here in Skydeck, loading cells is easy. You just flow liquids into the microfluidic channels. That's what you see here in between these U-shaped cages. Now, the key unmet needs is okay. How do you get them into the room? Everybody has a single room. Every cell, we want single room only. How do you get one cell into a room and not two, and not too many empty seats? So this is where our technology finds a niche. We just do this critical step. Once we load the cell, we just leave them there. And for people who don't do microfluidics, we think microfluidics as water. And I learned that they are more like honey. It's at this small scale. They are really viscous. If you leave the cell there, they don't come out. They stay in there. So that's a fascinating thing. Well, what can you do now that you do this separation much more easily than other technique? You know, you don't need stacks of well plates. There are more to it. The volume is so small. Now that you can measure the secretion of antibodies are molecules that the cell produce. It's like odors pizza have. Now, if you put the pizza in small containers, you walk by the container, you know which container has pizza in it. So if we just let the cell secrete antibodies, the volume is so small, within hours, you can put sensitive beads just outside the channel, and this is a real-time demonstration showing the cell on the left label these red antibodies is matched to the sensors on the microbeads, and they light up with fluorescent labels. So this is like you walking through a bunch of pigeonholes. You know where the gold mine is. And you can do this at scale. So we now have chips that can accommodate like 30,000 single cells. And after you loaded the cells and you see, you just watch, these are the rooms that lights up. So these cells are valuable. It's worthwhile to capture them, do further analysis. And that's also very difficult. Getting them in there is, well, kind of relatively easy. How do you get it out? That's not so easy. And again, our technique is employed here again. We call this moving cell at light speed. So using our technique, we just have these ladders nudging the cells, pushing them to the channel. These are kind of weak forces. If you're relying on just pure optical forces, you'll take like forever to move them through the channels. So moving at light speed is actually, you just move them to the hallway, you turn on the flow. And when the flow turns on, it's like Star Wars, zoom. The galaxy is very fast, and down to the conventional vials. The biologists know how to handle, how to deal with them for the following stages. So you can do all this totally on chip in an enclosed environment, and do this in a day, obtaining information, more information than what traditional methods will take 10 weeks to do. And the customers' feedback shows that they are able to find more targets. Using conventional methods, sometimes they don't find any targets. Using this on-chip technique, they find more targets. The holy grail in this business is to correlate. For those of you who are not biologists, it took a while for me to understand as well. This correlates so-called genotype with phenotype. Phenotype is, okay, what does this cell produce? What kind of antibody? is their antibody good for what I need? I'm looking for anti-PD-1 to cure cancers. So these are kind of phenotypical properties. Genotype is their genomic composition within the cells. Once we load the cells into their each individual single rooms, it's like every cell have their own IP address. It's unique. You can now free to take out a particular cell, you sequence them, you know their genomic composition, you can come back to your imaging data, you know exactly what type of antibody they produced. So it's a very few technique can do this type of correlation. So finally, lesson learned. Life is not a straight line, so neither is startup. We did not start a company to cure cancer. We are a curiosity-driven company looking for applications, and luckily, by hiring right people, we find a good application to match to our technology. They also asked me to perhaps mention what mistakes we have made, and perhaps you can avoid the mistakes if you are thinking of starting a company. There are so many mistakes, it's impossible to enumerate them, but that's how we learn. And my advice is don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just do it, basically, and learn from your mistakes. It may take you 2 journeys of startups to be successful, or 3, but that's how you learn, and everything is good. What I think is helpful, at least for my personal case, I'm so fortunate to be able to partner with a veteran who knows what will happen at every stage of the company. And that aiming high is very important. If your upper limit of your idea has plateaued somewhere, maybe people you know do not have the same idea, but believe me, doesn't matter how exotic the idea is. Somewhere, some people out there are doing exactly the same thing. If you are not 10x, 100x higher, by the time you are done with your product, somebody else have very similar products. So what we learn at the university research when we apply for grants, you need to aim 10x, 100x. I find that to be very similarly true, at least in these deep tech type of startups. Hire the very best people. They are the people who your company make or break. It's not how good your technology is. What's invented is already invented. What will be successful or not are the people who carry the technology. So that's really the key. During the journey, there are multiple times that we see there are much bigger competitors, microfluidic companies who are very successful, who are very well funded, and we said, wow, boy, if they were to work on our problem, they could kill us in a few months. The truth is they never do. They're too busy. They're busy with their own gold mines. Nobody bother with these obscure offshoot technologies that until we are successful, nobody thinks very much of it. So, if you have 3 to 5 really good people, you are as good as gold. You can beat Genentech, you can beat all big companies, computer company, you can beat IBM. You don't need to be afraid of your big competitors. And lastly, enjoy the process. It's, for me, it's really not the end. It's the process that I find very joyful. Okay, so that's my part.
All right,
Good
next
to
we'll
you.
have Naresh.
Thank you for that wonderful talk. It's hard to follow that talk.
To put on a break, to be less
Too
aggressive.
bad you have to.
And there are other
kidding.
break
Good evening,
points,
everyone.
such as
I'll get
the
started
PD-1.
with one.
So Jimmy
I
Carter.
was a postdoc here. I was working on RNAi delivery. My PhD was in organic chemistry, moved to a virus lab, and then shifted gears, ended up developing a couple of drug delivery agents to deliver things like CRISPR. UC Berkeley filed a patent, and at that point, by that point, I already caught the entrepreneurship bug. And around 2011, I was trying to start a company, and I didn't know how to launch a company because in grad school and postdoc, they never teach you anything about business or anything to do with startups. I was running around trying to learn about startups. I was going to UCSF in the middle of the day because QB3 used to have some good seminars in the middle of the day. That was like every week, and my professor used to raise his eyebrows, and he's like, what the hell is this guy doing, leaving the lab in the middle of the day? And that was a question like, why am I going from UC Berkeley, of all the place, to UCSF to learn something new, and why don't we have anything? And that led to me exploring for a whole year and ending up starting this group called the Berkeley Postdoc Entrepreneurship Program, just for educating postdocs like myself and everybody else who have that research that could be potentially translated to a startup company. I'm not talking about mobile apps. We're talking about hard technologies, just like Professor Wu was talking about. How many of you love the research that you do? Tell me that. That's good. And what happens, like, after your grad school and postdoc, when you leave the lab, what happens to that research? Maybe a publication. If you push harder, maybe it'll end up into a patent, and then you leave it there. So in Silicon Valley, there's something called as the value of debt.
Less aggressive.
These are for startups.
And
who raise a
there are
little bit of
other
money, and then they're not able to make much
breakpoints,
progress.
such as the
Everything
PD1.
ends up in
So
something
Jimmy
called
Carter.
the value of debt. And I moved that to academia. Okay, this is what happens in universities and federal labs. You have good scientific ideas. You do your research for 5, 6 years, 7 years, and then there's a lot of scientific uncertainty. There's risk. You go through all these things, and then maybe publish and patent, get your degree or a postdoc, and everything mostly dies. How many of you look back at your thesis after it's printed? Most of the time, you don't look at that. Yeah, good one, good. You must be doing some good research. What we're trying to do is like, hey, think about the next step. Like, hey, if you really like your research, like, can we do something about this? Is there a way to productize your research? Where do we start? These are the questions I want you guys to ask yourself, so that you can actually maybe someday take your research to the market. And one thing often comes up is like, when do you start thinking about this process? Most of the time, you're very busy with the research. You got to pass your qualifiers, finish your classes, and then write your thesis, and then think about jobs. And that is the time, most of the time, you think about like what to do with your careers. And entrepreneurship, most of the time, never comes up as a career option, because traditionally, if you're getting a PhD, you're going to become a professor. That was the path. But what I'm trying to tell is like, start thinking about these ideas much ahead of time. While you're taking classes, go take a class in the business school. Go come to the workshops and then see if there's a way for your research to come to the market. I just put up this chart here, initial step research. Like, all startups come from an idea. What I believe is like, when you're doing your research 5 or 6 years, you're spending your blood and sweat into that. Explore some time to see if there's any way to prioritize the idea. And university is the best ecosystem that you can be in. The first thing I want you guys to do is like, go talk to your professor. Professor like, and go, see, hey, I want to start a company. What should I do? Can I talk to somebody else? Professors have phenomenal networks. You don't know that they have that networks. Please make sure you go and use those ecosystems they have, and also talk to the IP offices, intellectual property offices. These are the offices that actually will file a patent for you if you want to start a company. Okay, most of the time, the research does not get translated to a patent. Okay, you actually have to put in an effort to go to the IP office and say like, hey, I think there is you have to do something called as invention disclosure. You have to fill up a form saying like, this is the research I'm working on. This is why I think there is a need for filing a patent and give the use cases of those things and say like, if I actually build a patent, maybe I want to start a company, or these are the companies, like there's the Genentech, there's like Procter & Gamble that might want to license my technology. You have to convince the IP office that there's a good case for you to file the patent. Okay, most of us don't do that because we don't know about those things, but make that effort. Go back to your labs. If you're into research, please do that. Startups are hard. After I left my postdoc, I did launch my own company called Nosocom Solutions. What we are doing is we are building technologies to sterilize medical equipment in hospitals. We're trying to prevent infections in hospitals. People die. About 100,000 people die in the US every year. And we spend about $20 to $30 trillion fighting infections. Okay, I thought that is a worthwhile problem to solve. And I got into that from organic chemistry, molecular biology, to building hardware to disinfect medical devices. The journey was like tough, but then, as Professor Wu was saying, you enjoy, you learn so much. I've seen postdocs who go from postdoc number 1, postdoc number 2, postdoc number 3. Try giving a shot to startup. If you don't want to launch a startup, go work for a startup. In a couple of years, you'll learn so much more than being a postdoc. Now I can actually, I've learned software. I learned how to build boards, PC boards, and I can actually assemble the whole product. I wouldn't have been able to learn these things if I was a postdoc. There's nothing wrong with the postdoc, but just expand your horizon. That's what I'm trying to say. If you decide to go launch a startup company, the first thing I want you guys to do is, who are the potential customers? This is the first question. Before you launch a company, think who is going to use your product if you actually build one. Do that customer research, interview people, interview companies that are in the similar space so that you'll get so much feedback during this process. Most of the time people focus on building the product and doing the business models and so on, but before you do anything, see if anybody is willing to pay for your product. If you actually go spend 5-6 years building the product, raising money and going through that path, if somebody is willing to pay the money, see if who else can pay that money. Startups are about scaling. You can probably sell your product to 1 or 2 people, but then at the end of the day, what defines success is scalability. Can you sell 1,000 products? Can you sell 1 million products? That's what it's going to be about. Okay, so that should be a primary focus. Customer, customer, customer. A paying customer. Don't go for like freebies. Do that research. And who's going to fund these? You need money to build a product. Do the customer research first. If you're convinced that, hey, there is some market for this, I think it will be a market that somebody will invest the money. Where do you raise the money? I think being in academia, if you actually want to take your research to the market, the government has phenomenal process for funding startup ideas.
I'm afraid.
They have something called the SBIR and STTR
they
grants, the Small Business Innovation Research Grants and the Small Business Technology Transfer Research. They give money in 2 phases. The first phase is the proof of concept, about $250,000. You have 6 months to 1 year to prove that there is some juice in your idea. Okay, that is free money. They're not going to take any equity for you guys. We have workshops to help you write those grants on campus. Make use of those things. And if you actually, get some proof of concept done in the first phase in 1 year, you can get up to like $1 million, $1.5 million in phase 2. Again, academia is the best place because you already have some support from your professor or the lab that you're going to get funded a paycheck, a small paycheck and a healthcare while you're at the university. Okay, so that is the best place for you to start without diving completely into that. There are certain rules once you get the funding, but then you'll have money there. I'm going to share this presentation online on BPEP webpage. I want you guys to download this, something called as a business model generation. This was developed by Alexander Osterwalder and Steve Blank. What this gives you is it's something to think about. Like if you want to actually start a company, think about what you need, like what are the key partners, who do you need, the value proposition of the product that you're trying to build, the customer relations that you're trying to build. One of the biggest thing is going to be customers. Who's going to pay for your product? NSF has a program called NSF iCore. The whole concept about this program is for you to get out of your lab, go talk to about 100 different people, potential customers, to get feedback about your product that you're trying to build. Most of the time what happens is when you come back from these interviews, you would have learned that you'd learn different things. One, either nobody wants your product, drop it. So you're not wasting much of your life. Number two, they might say, you might think that, oh, I'm trying to build this diagnostic in this space, but it is actually something else can be added to this and build a much better product. Maybe it's a therapeutic if you actually modify those things. So, these are the things you actually will come back and build a startup based on that. If you don't want to go that far, UC Berkeley has at least one program that I know of called the, this is in the energy space. The School of Business has the Clean Tech to Market. The Clean Tech to Market program, where if your research is in the clean tech space, you can actually submit your research to the program there, where the business students will actually go out and do the research for you. They'll do that customer research, that's a part of the curriculum, and then come back and give you a report about what the industry and the potential customers are saying. So this is a nice place to be in UC Berkeley. Make use of those things and try to get as much information before you actually build the product. One thing I would like to say is, if you're in the university ecosystem, one of the first things that will happen is you want to incorporate the company. They'll bring you a lawyer. They say, oh, we'll offer you a lawyer for free. And they'll form a company for you. A C corporation, it's a Delaware corporation. You'll be named as a CEO of the company. There'll be a CTO. Don't do that. Because unless you've done all these things, do not start the company, because if you're located in the state of California, every year you start paying $800 in taxes for California. You'll pay $400 to the state of Delaware. It doesn't matter if you don't have any product or sales or anything else. So try to stall that process until you do all the research and you're very sure that it can actually go forward. And you can actually start writing your grants. The good thing about the business model generation is all you need is like sticky notes, because this is going to evolve. Back in the day, they used to have business plans. They used to have like 30 to 40 page business plan. You need to write the whole thing. But no business plan ever survived because it changes. Once you start a company, everything changes. So get something like this on your board, put some sticky notes. This is going to evolve as you do the research. So you can actually remove them and actually evolve that process. So this is how it's going to look like after some time. And always think about money. You start a business because, well, there could be the good side, as in like you want to cure cancer. You want to help the humanity. But then, unless you're making money, it's not going to be worth it. Okay, nobody's going to invest in your company. So if you're trying to raise money and make money, think about the revenue streams. Advisors. I was a postdoc and I didn't know anybody other than my PI, one PI that I knew about in my postdoc. And when I wanted to start a company, I didn't have the knowledge in marketing and sales and hospitals that I wanted to get into. What helped me was a ton of advisors. How do you get advisors? If you come to a meeting like this, talk to the people like Professor Wu here, tell what you're trying to do. He or she might connect you to somebody. This campus is phenomenal. I got tons and tons of mentors just doing that. I'll show you my advisor. This is my advisory board. Dr. Schwartzberg is a professor here. He's also the head of infection control at Alta Hospital. He opened the doors to that hospital for clinical studies for me. they connected me to another doctor called Kenneth Lee. He's a professor at UC Davis. He's the head of infection control at Kaiser. Those are the networks that you build once you start asking people. Stacy Nettler, she happens to be the sister of a professor at law school. She invested $50,000 in my startup company because her friend died because of an infection in a hospital. Who knew? And because I didn't know anything about sales, just because of networking, Greg is the VP of National Sales for Philips Healthcare. He joined the advisory board. Krishnan, Herb was one of the founding members of Omnicell, another company that was in my space. Miguel was from Siemens Healthineers. He's the head of marketing for Siemens. What you'll be surprised is I could not pay anything to any of these people. They were very generously offering up their time because they believe in what you're trying to do. I think these are the kinds of people that you want to get in touch with. And they will connect you to other people. That is the best part of Silicon Valley. If you actually go approach somebody and ask them for help, most of the time they will not ask you for anything in return, and they'll offer their time and expertise if they have the time to do so. You just have to go and ask them. So if you're really trying to start a company, if I could do this, you can definitely do this. I came all the way from India some time ago. Ended up at Berkeley, and I'm here. If you want to start a company, you need a place. You need to gain some knowledge. That is where incubators and accelerators come to the picture. Incubators are places like Citrus Foundry and Skydeck. These are the places where they're bringing a bunch of mentors, and they have classes to teach you about everything from intellectual property, how to raise money, how to write grants, and so on. So incubators, you go at the idea stage. If you have nothing else, go there, learn everything you can. Accelerators come into a picture where you have a prototype, a functional prototype. And incubators mostly don't give you any money. And you go to accelerators, they actually give some money. Skydeck, actually, if you get selected, they give you $100,000 for 6 months. And they also will put you in touch with a bunch of investors and all the network that you'll need. And there's Citrus Foundry on campus. There are a bunch of them. You can talk to any of the BPEP members. We'll be able to help you guys. Connect to them. And this is the map of the university ecosystem. This is on the website as well. You have student groups, postdoc groups, incubators, investor networks, competitions, and research programs. Just spend some time going through those. And I don't know, these are some of the companies that UC Berkeley has launched. Amyris, Intel, Kaiser, NetApp, Tesla, they all came from some of the technologies from UC Berkeley. So it's possible that for you guys to be one of those next companies. I'll just leave you with the last thought. Think about entrepreneurship as a career pathway. If you're trying to go for another postdoc, especially people in hard sciences try to do that, try joining a company, startup company. If you don't want to take that whole risk, we have a program going on here at Skydeck. We have the program called the Berkeley Science Fellows Program, where you can actually intern while being a postdoc. It takes 4 to 5 hours of your week per week. You can actually spend some time with the startup companies here, learn what they're doing, and we have a bunch of postdocs already working with startups here, as in they give the technical expertise to them. They help them review the grants. They're learning business skills from them. So we have programs going on here that they can be a part of. Yes, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Why don't we have you two take a seat here? Let's bring these chairs out from behind the table. And I'd like to start a panel conversation. I think those are both really inspiring and great talks. Let's start with questions from the audience. And if no one has think we have plenty of questions. Let's start over here. You want to just say your name and where you're from?
So my name is Katerina Novikova. I'm from Europe. I'm visiting scholar here at the Institute of European Studies. I do actually research on how we can help in Europe to move laboratory results to the market. So that's why I'm asking you this question. You mentioned that you do research in university and also you have your company. So I just wonder, how do you balance this IP rights? To avoid this conflict between the IP that is produced in university and IP that is produced in the company. And the second question is about the funding and the financing, especially at the early stage of your companies. Where did you get the financing?
Very good question. Managing conflict is a very important part, and actually for our case, after we're spinning out the technology, we more or less winding down the activities at the university. So I moved my research to a totally different direction. And everything related to this space are now done by the company. They talk to the IPIRA, IPRA office, that's our IP office, license the technology, and university have kind of very clear rules. It's worth maybe for you to visit the IPRA office and talk to them. So they have guidelines on how to avoid conflicts. For example, I have the patents. I'm a co-inventor for many of the patents, the company license. And the rule is that when they negotiate with the company, who my partner is the CEO, I would recuse myself. So I don't get involved in the process. I don't approve. I do not involve in any negotiation. So Berkeley is one of the universities that has lots of experience in that, and they have written guidelines on a lot of this. For some other professors or students that they are involved in projects that the research is still active in the university, but they are already spinning out activities, then this activity will have to be reported to the university. There is a conflict of interest committee, COI committee, and they will evaluate in detail. The thing that they care most about is students, or to some extent postdoc as well. If you are involved in a startup that your advisor is co-founder of, and you're working part-time for the company, part-time for the university research funded by federal government, that's kind of a red flag. That's very difficult to overcome. And so the advice for students in that case is, well, you really have to choose. You like your degree, pick your degree, finish your degree, then you can go full-time with the company. Or degree is not important for you. You want to do it full-time with the company. When you are successful or when you are tired, you come back to get your degree and do that. So it's an area where it's not possible to do both.
And for the financing of the company?
Financing, I think Naresh covered it well. It's the normal route. So you need to find usually angels who are interested, who are fascinated by your technology. You need to convince them. And then there are venture capitalists for a series of funding. For many software-based type of technology, even our own students, they are successful entrepreneurs. They basically just do that in their garage or bedrooms. For hardware-oriented, so-called now, the term here is a deep tech technology. It's much harder. You need capital, you need a lab, you need a space. You need to have funding. So there's no alternatives. Talking to people, finding partners, and finding angels who believe in your technology. Yeah, there's no alternative. I don't see alternative to that.
You said you started as a curiosity-driven company. What was your first idea when you started the company? It wasn't, but ended up, right?
Yeah, we have so many force starting ideas. Well, I was fortunate to find this partner who doesn't care that I don't have any ideas. Well, I have many ideas, but none of them looking in retrospect is not really practical. He saw something deeper than I see the technology. And one thing that Naresh said that resonate a lot with me is go talk to customers. So I took 1 year leave in the company, just 3 people sitting in a room. He did foresee rapid growth for the company, so we have a pretty big warehouse, just 3 of us sitting there. What do? Well, I mean, there's not much we can do. We visit customers. So we visit customers. We don't have products. We don't have actually product ideas. So we visit companies to basically listen to what they are interested, what they would potentially buy, what they would potentially work with us on. So one of the things I mentioned, for example, we do have these cool videos that are based on our university technology, based on the patents that we license from the university. And we also have me kind of adding credentials to that. I'm one of the co-inventors. So I would show these videos. And just based on that, you hear so many things from the customers. So very often we heard cloning is a labor-intensive task for all these, every pharma companies. For many of you who are postdocs in the biospace, any of you who are postdoc in the biospace, so they say they are tired of doing pipetting. They are pipetting all the time. They got carpal tunnel syndromes for just doing pipetting. So they kind of connect, they see our video and says, you can put 1 cell in each compartment, just that we'll buy that from you. We say, okay, thank you, but we don't have a product. We'll go back and build the equipment and do that. But we got lots of valuable feedback. We know what industry value, potential customer, we know what they value. So I resonate very much with what Naresh said.
Can I just add one thing to that? Everybody has ideas, and one thing we scientists are afraid of is like people might steal your ideas. So we are afraid of actually discussing our ideas with people, and we don't talk much. One thing I tell to people is, if somebody can listen to your idea and go replicate it, there's no company there. It cannot be that easy. Okay, and ideas are dime a dozen. Execution of something is the painful part of it. Building a company, building a team, building a product, they can steal your ideas, but they won't be able to do anything about it. So don't hesitate talking about your ideas to people. Go talk to as many as possible. Start with your parents, people who, if you can explain them and they can see the value, then go to that next level. But then talking to people is going to be very, very important. Don't be afraid. Nobody is going to steal it.
Actually, I have a question about one of the advice you mentioned. So don't be afraid of big companies, right? So do you have any fun stories to share in terms of how you manage talking to big companies and how you leverage their connection or maybe their resources to help start up?
And you mentioned don't be afraid of these big companies as competitors or as customers?
Competitors. So I'll give you an example. So I'm sort of in this microfluidics space. And microfluidics is a weird area that there are so many research. A lot of researchers at the university publish lots of papers. Very few success examples in real world. Finally, there is a few good startup companies. So Fluidigm, coming out from Stanford, is kind of a well-known brand. They are the trailblazers. They bring the lab technology. They have a real product. They do these microfluidic channels. They capture cells. They can do so-called single-cell sequencing. So initially I said, wow, they have 100 million funding. We are starting. We have few people. Whatever we're going to do, they're going to outpace us. We worked with a very big company before. They could dedicate the entire division, the entire laboratory. They kill us at instant. Rain Dance. So back in 2011, they got 100 million funding. doing droplet type of technology. I said, wow, if they turn their attention to what we are interested in, they kill us immediately. Well, the fact is everybody have their pet projects. The company have their vision they are marching on. They are not bothering with, they have to focus. Right? The only way they have to execute, they have to succeed. They are not really bothering too much about all these offshoot technologies. And when companies grow to a certain size, I don't know about Google Health, but it's a gigantic entity. Well, you start to have management problems within the organization. Left hand doesn't know what right hand is doing. And they are really, if they have 100 people, they are not really 100 times smarter than your smart one employee. They are not talking to each other. They are going in all different directions. If you have 3 to 5 people who are coherent, who are clear-minded, who all think in the same directions, you are a very strong team. You are very strong.
I think that's a very true statement until you have a product. I spent many years in industry. Once you have something that they recognize that it might be a threat, then you got to be leery of them stealing it, okay? But I think the stages that these companies are in, they don't have to worry. But never forget that once you get there, they are very good at stealing or reverse engineering or getting around your patents. I've had a top guy at GM tell me we've never paid a royalty on anything because, except CDM, and he said because we always figure out how to engineer around it or figure out a better way or steal it. Because I knew a lot of guys in the IC business and they said never talk about the process. But this is after you get something done.
Right.
So I think you're absolutely right. Don't be afraid because they're too big. They don't know what to do. The bureaucracy will not do anything and change until you have a product that might be a threat and get some traction.
That's a very good point. We're not there yet, so that's a very good point. It is, I mean, you kind of were, you made it, at least you get their attention, and it is.
They're always looking to see what's out there, but they're not going to do anything.
Right.
They only do benchmarking once
Right.
you have something out there.
Right, and I heard stories that company would settle with their smaller competitors, even paying 100 million to them is nothing. It's like just.
Many times then it's going to be cheaper to buy and steal.
But
They'll buy you.
At the end, if you have something that they can't steal it or engineer around it, they'll rather buy it. It's just like the medical device industry. They're not putting any money in. They wait till you got traction and they'll buy you
Right.
for $200 or $300. We've got
Right.
a few that will
Right.
off them now.
Right. And
Big
sometimes they have very large IP portfolio that they are just waiting. They may not be in that business.
The one problem is if you really believe in a company and you get it going, and they buy you out, sometimes they just want to shelf it because they don't want to, they'll put you out of business. So you never know the real goal when you get to that level.
And big companies have gotten smarter too, I think. Like Professor Wu was saying, it's hard for a big company to actually take up an idea and build something from scratch because it's going to be much more expensive. They need a whole team of engineers, scientists, and which a small team of 5 people can actually get it done much faster. And one advice I give to people is, like, especially in deep tech space, don't try to go from point A to Z by yourself. It is a very, very long path and hard path. If you're starting out as an early grad student or a postdoc, building a product, think in small pieces like A to D, D to J. And these are much achievable chunks, and if you can actually have a decent exit, say you walk out with a few $1 million in 4 or 5 years, it is not a bad thing. Okay, so what we try to tell people is, like, try to build those relations at least in deep tech spaces, because if you're trying to build a therapeutic, the amount of money you need to get to the market is like $2 to $3 billion is what you're talking about. I don't think it's going to be easy for a small startup to raise that much money unless you have some blockbuster going on, which is rare. So think about partnerships early on. Try to build some. Go to IP office. IP office has like good connections with nice big companies. They might be able to connect you to those companies with similar thought processes. So building those relations and having those advisory boards really helps.
So both of you have really emphasized making a really good team. But I can't help but wonder, what are some of the mistakes that you've made when building your team?
I'll go with the first one. I'll go with the first mistake people do. Like, when you start, you want to build a company, 3 friends come together, or you get your roommate and say, hey, we have 4 people, 25, 25, 25, 25%, all equal equity. Okay? Don't do that. Because most of the time, things happen in life. You might get married, I might have kids, and your priorities might change. There might be one person actually pulling the weight of it, and the rest of them might have to go pick up another job for whatever reason. And somebody gets a better job, especially in the Silicon Valley. I started with 3 co-founders. In 3 months, one of them got a job at Facebook, $200,000 salary. He left. What you're doing by splitting that equity initially is you're getting into legal issues, because the person is going to take that 25% and walk away. If you want to bring another co-founder later on, you won't have anything you're going to dilute yourself. So, if you're actually forming your teams, first thing is when you have a nice law firm, what they do is they have 100 million shares. What they do is they have something called vesting. The stocks vest over a period of time. So if they spend 2 years in the company, they get a certain percentage of those stocks. Okay, always, always, always do that. Rather than branding somebody as a co-founder, a CEO, give yourself some time as in hey, we just have an idea here. Let's give ourselves 6 months. Let's build things. Okay, and then see how each of us are getting along with each other, and then see what our weaknesses are, because you don't have everything, all the skills. Try to see what you lack during this trial phase, and then see what the importance of each person is, and then split the equity based on that. That's a much better way. Don't start outright. Don't split it equally.
Good point.
With teams, I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more.
Yeah, I don't have a better example. That's a very good point.
Look at it like a marriage. That's the best way. That person going to be there with you till
Think of it.
till you part. I mean, seriously.
It
That's
is.
how you got to pick somebody that really wants to be there with you.
It is. It is. Think of us. Always find smarter people than you. Don't be afraid, because you're going to need smarter people than you. You should be the dumbest in that team, and then you should have everybody that should be the smarter than you. That is how nice teams, and then build that trust by doing everything.
Naresh, but if that rule goes for everyone,
Exactly.
they will have to be the first one, right?
And for those of you who are students and postdocs, I have another advice. You could also think about joining a startup company.
Mm-hmm.
Your first job don't have to be you're founding your own companies.
Yeah.
We talking to many of our own students, my own students. When people thinking about founding a company, they picture Mark Zuckerberg. They picture the movie they sing in social networking. Actually, students mentioned that to me. In most real-life cases, this is very, very rare. You need lots of experiences. You need lots of veterans who have been in the valley for decades. They know inside out. They know how to get things done. They know how to really build the products. It's not a bad experience to have experience working with those people. I have, at Berkeley, we can say we have the smartest students and postdocs. In my experience working with the company, there are a lot of smart people out there who may not have even advanced degrees, but really, really smart. And experience counts. So you don't really have to make this your first job. It's not a bad idea to get some experience so that you know when you strike on your own how to do it really well.
Completely agree with that. Experience really matters. When I first started, I had a couple of engineers who said they'll build the product, but they've never built anything in their life previously. They have the theoretical knowledge, and we had to dump everybody, and then go find somebody really experienced in actually building a product, because in my case, I was building something for the hospital industry. It has to get FDA approvals. There are standards that you need to follow, and the specific rules and regulations. And this is something that only comes with experience. So make sure you try to get those experiences, or have co-founders or your teammates who had those experiences. They're going to hurt you otherwise. Don't go with the social media movies and stuff. College dorms, 3 co-founders, and it doesn't happen that way, at least in deep tech spaces.
A question about Berkeley Lights. So are you guys selling machines or doing contract research or actually selling antibodies? Like what's your business model and how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, so that's something that we spend a lot of time on, and with first a few employees who are industry veterans, we sort of go through that a lot. Right now, we sell machines. There's also contracted research. So we also learn how the industry works. Basically, companies don't just go and buy a machine from you. These are more elaborate processes. Say, I mentioned about everybody's racing to produce the antibodies. There's a formula. If you are months late, that equivalent to how many millions of revenues lost. So this is well known. But every company have a different process. So it's not like a consumer world. You have an iPhone. Everybody buys iPhone. It's not even a Boeing 737 that people pick different options. The company says we've been doing this process for 20 years. They need this to work in this process. But the company is willing to pay these potential, say, Berkeley Lights. If you can demonstrate that this works for us using the process we specify, we'll pay you X dollar of NRE. So it's part of the sales process. Without seeing it work, nobody will buy the equipment. So it's kind of come hand in hand. We did talk about the process of why don't we produce antibodies. And if you are in the space of these pharmaceutical startups, the valuation of, say, tour company like Berkeley Lights, we make shuttles that we sell to anybody who wants to dig gold. We have lots of customers. There could be much smaller startup. They have one idea where to get their pot of gold. They are pharmaceutical companies. If they pass through phase 1 and phase 2, they are way more valuable than the tour company. So sometimes you will be tempted to say, we have the best tool. Why don't we dig gold ourselves? We'll dig gold faster than anybody else because only we have the tool. So that's been discussed, but it depends on what your goal is. Eventually, there are so many smart people out there, so many smart ideas out there, many unknown targets, and if you get your tools out there, you never know who will be able to strike it first. So that's kind of a decision we made. It is likely some other people will make the decision to go the other way, decide to just produce antibody, and that could be. I could see that as a business model.
Have you looked at putting up centers to make it for the pharmaceuticals besides the machinery to make,
Yeah, so there is
contract
CRO business. There's a contract research organization. There are contract manufacturing organizations. So now they are our customers as well. Now they have our tools. So they have more the right infrastructures unless you want to compete with them. Yeah.
So you said here that maybe the first job should not be to be an entrepreneur. But I usually think that we are entrepreneurs because we do things that we don't know that they're impossible to be done.
Right.
If you work for someone else before, won't you find out that those things are impossible, and then you'll be you'll work for them for the rest of your life?
Right. That's very true. So I mentioned at the beginning that you need to take my advice with a grain of salt. Mark Zuckerberg will not take my advice anyway. Bill Gates will not take my advice. They are naturally talented people. They don't need experience. For, I would say, a good majority of people, experience helps. Yes?
I have a question for Professor Wu. So you advise us in general, both in academia and industry, that to aim high. But when you're aiming high, was there any moment when you get any self-doubt about your idea? And did you really prepare for some percentage of risk? And how high the risk is acceptable?
Risk is high. If you are talking about startup business, the risk is high. And there are always new things coming out from the left that you have not anticipated. even though you may, at the time, writing your business plan may be bulletproof, but you don't know what's coming out that's not currently widely known or in the marketplace. I've seen many people write the business plans basically comparing who's producing this right now, what is their sales price, and I can produce that 10 times cheaper. Well, you don't know their profit margin is 95%. So you're 10 times cheaper doesn't mean anything. By the time you're done, you're probably just 3 times cheaper. And they have a lot of margin to kill that. So something to avoid is you pick a product that you know how to do 10 times cheaper. That's probably not a good way to go. Risk is always high, and there's no way around it.
And most startups fail.
And sometimes you just need to be lucky that your ideas is indeed more robust than those other ideas.
Luck, and you're talking about timing.
And timing. Sometimes your ideas are indeed better, but these other guys are faster to market, and the market adopted this slightly worse technology. And even though you have better technology, you could miss the timing forever.
Hey, I've got to go, but I wanted to, good job. One other place a lot of these companies can go that maybe a little bit further along, California Life Science Institute, Steve Park, you know him, they do a lot of, they take applications for companies, and they have great mentors, from industry or whatever, and it's in the biosciences and in the medical devices. I don't, have you been to any of
We have the speakers come here, actually. Yeah.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, they come here. Yeah.
Are they
Thank
part
you.
of UC? Or?
No, CLSA is in the city, state-wide.
Oh, I
California Life Science Second.
see. I see.
When a company go forward, I think that there are some interest conflicts because sometimes it's different. Well, opinion, idea will change. How do you deal with the team conflict and the teamwork? How do you deal with it?
It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. And sometimes partner splits because they have
people
very
leave.
different ideas.
Yeah.
And eventually, coming back to Naresh's earlier comments of these all totally equal partnership, so eventually one of them will have to say, well, I will make the decisions. May not be the right decision, but then you need to have a way of resolving this. And I've seen many examples of people parting ways.
And the more money and the more people you have in the company, the more conflicts, the
Yeah.
more headaches you will have, for
Right.
sure. It's unavoidable. At some point, you will evolve as a leader. You'll be able to see that something is coming. Communication helps. Keeping them ahead of time, says like, hey, this is going to happen. People might disagree and they might leave, but that is the course of life.
So that's where your talents of management will
yeah.
comes in, and some people are born better managers than others.
Our experience helps. If you have been working
Experience
at other
helps.
companies, you see what happened in those companies, and you can
Yeah.
actually. So that is,
Right.
and then you have those advisors. That is where they come very, very handy. You need to be able to trust your advisors and go tell everything as it is. He or she might have seen something like that, because one person is not going to have all the experiences in life. So the more advisors you have, you need to build that network of advisors as you grow, regardless of startup or a company. Just try and have that network.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I think, are there any other questions, or should we, one more? Let's do one more.
One more. Here, could you please tell, how do you attract talent people for your companies? Do you keep like special filter? Do you use kind of trips? Use LinkedIn? How do you pick up exactly the right person for the right role?
Yeah, you need a really good recruiting person. So something we often neglect when you think about founding a company. You have technical part, you have business part. This human resource part takes spatial talents, and we were fortunate to have a person really skilled in that. The person at the beginning, you cannot afford to engage with any headhunters. So it is that person digging through LinkedIn, digging through website, calling people, calling the technical people's network, going through people's. And you, if you do that, sometimes you get really surprises. You get pretty high-level people from big company visiting you. You say, well, really, you know, we just started the company a year ago, really. So yeah, you get sometimes traction, sometimes people have ideas. You also need to have the skills and sophistication to judge whether these are the people who you want to work with. They usually come with also pretty big price tag as well. They would take you know, pretty big part of the companies, and you will have to decide, is that worth the investment? There are a lot of hard decisions. But even down to engineer level, how do you find good engineers? You know, that if you are starting your company, you will have to develop this feel for people. You will need to, if you are successful, you know, you're probably successful because you can smell the right people and you hire more of good people. That's how you become successful.
And come to events like these, and then a couple of the colleagues pitch the idea. If one of them liked their ideas, they actually used to network afterwards. If you're more serious at a startup stage, what I usually used to do, some of our friends used to do in the startups is like, we give the problem to them, like any current problem that we have in the company, whether it is engineering or biology, we give it to somebody who's interested in working with you. Think through the thought process. They don't have to find a solution, but their critical thinking and how they approach the problem will give you a sense of like, a good sense of like what they're capable of. And you know, if they're asking for help or not, you know, people don't ask for help, and that's a big thing. You know, you'll pick up as you go, but networking is very helpful. Eventually, or come to work with the internship programs there, you'll find people, you know.
What I find helpful are people who are valuable, people who have brought product to markets. They build the entire process. If they are really the key person, it may involve a big team, but there's always one or two key people. If they have that type of experience, they are really good.
Yeah, on broad experiences.
Broad experience and really bring in product to market. It's not. It's much harder than publish science paper.
And I think I want to give everyone a chance to also mingle with the speakers as well over drinks. So I think let's go ahead and, will you guys be sticking around?
Yeah,
For a
sure,
bit.
for a little bit.
Let's stick around for a little bit. Let's everyone, you have plenty of pizza, plenty of drinks. So I think let's adjourn the seated panel discussion and let's do some mingling and networking, I think. Sound
Okay.
good?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's great having you as a speaker.
Okay. Come on, David. Alex.
First you three, then I take.
So what do you pronounce it? BPEP or BPEP?
Just for the drink.
Now ask Ray to take the picture so that you're here.
That's I think, yes.